All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and thank you for joining us here at Where Am I to Go podcast. Before we start our show today, there's a couple things I would like to bring to your attention. First of all, we have a Facebook page where we post lots of pictures of places we've been and things that we've done, and also other little things that people might be interested in knowing. We also have an email address at whereamitigopodcast@gmail.com. If anybody has any ideas, suggestions, or thoughts about our program, please let us know. I'm more than interested in hearing comments, feedback, and that type of stuff, and it will also help to make a better show. And lastly, we are on Patreon. If anybody's interested in joining us there and helping us along with our adventures, we would be more than happy to have your assistance. Now, thanks again for joining us today, and let's get on with the show. Today I was driving down the road through Burnet, Texas, and as I was going through, off to my right-hand side, there's a great big sign that says Motorcycle Museum. Almost didn't get myself slowed down fast enough in order to get here. But I came on in to take a look around, and I met up with Pat. And Pat said that we could do a podcast here, so here's where we are, and this is what we're going to do today. Thank you, Pat, for taking the time with us today.
Well, thanks for you guys dropping by. It's nice to meet you, and we're excited to show you the museum.
Well, I just took a quick sneak peek. This looks like it's going to be quite the entertaining museum. Now, when you first walk into this museum, they've got a bunch of t-shirts, a couple of motorcycles on display, and his wife was here and was pointing out several different pictures. It looks to me like you got started in the motorcycle entertainment or business or whatever when you were just a young kid.
That's correct. Actually, my dad, back in El Paso, Texas, he was in the Army, and he planted the seed with my brother Mike and I on motorcycles. He had a Cushman scooter that he rode to base and back for work, and my brother and I both believe that that's what set the hook in us to this day.
A Cushman scooter.
Maybe.
Do you have one of those in here?
I do. We got a couple.
Those are pretty cool. There's a guy that lives in our town that has one that every once in a while, once or twice a year, you might see him riding his little Cushman scooter to town.
They were real popular back then. They were affordable, made in America. They had basically a big, almost like a lawnmower motor in them.
Right.
So they were easy to work on, maintain. So, and they're very collectible now.
Yes, they are. I've seen them in several different museums, and I've seen prices on some of them, and they seem to be very collectible. So anyway, we walk on in here, and we happen to see about the first bike I ever rode on, which is a Honda 175, and it's sitting here on display. Kind of piqued my interest a little bit because that's what I rode when I was in high school, and it's sitting right here. And then across the way we have a Suzuki. It's a
71 was what's called a TS90, a 90cc, and it's an exact replica of my original race bike from back in 1971.
So you used to be a motocross racer?
Correct, for about 10 years.
For about 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. So you rode a lot of the backcountry here in Texas?
Well, not in this area, actually. Right now we're in Central Texas.
Okay.
What we call the hill country, which is the prettiest part of Texas.
It is. This area is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, and but I was actually raised in El Paso, Texas. My dad was at Fort Bliss in the Army, and so we were more desert type of riders.
Okay.
Sand, a lot of sand, and a whole different scene than right here, but yeah.
Now, were you riding the endurance type races, or were you riding more motocross track, or?
Yeah, mostly motocross, but I raced cross country, enduros, pretty much anything that was on two wheels.
That gets kind of grueling, doesn't it? Those long endurance races, or?
Yes, yeah, you go for hours, actually, as fast as you can go, and they were a lot of fun though. You still see them every now and then, like you heard of the Baja 1000.
Right.
That's kind of the extreme version of what I used to do. Ours were like 100 miles.
That's still a long time sitting on a bike.
Going 80, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Out across the desert. Yeah, that's got to be kind of entertaining anyway, because you never know what's in front of you.
That's the thing is, there's always a surprise around every corner. So that's what kind of made it more thrilling than motocross. You got to practice on the motocross track, so you knew what each turn, but the off-road was, to me, was more fun, actually.
And now the bikes you were riding at the time are nothing like the bikes now. I mean, they've got the monoshocks, and they've got all the suspension upgrades and all that kind of stuff, to where those older bikes were a little bit rougher ride, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Well, comparing to what we have today, absolutely. But back then, we thought we were riding the latest and greatest. You know, it's just basically what the technology is at the time. And but looking back, we're lucky to have survived, I guess.
You watch those old movies like On Any Sunday, and those guys were doing some what you would have considered wild stuff at the time. But now it seems like when you're watching the guys just out riding, a lot of those guys are able to do what was difficult then. And I'm figuring it's just because technology with the bikes has changed so much, but maybe that's not it.
No, it's a combination of a lot of things, but I personally think the bikes they have a lot better suspension these days, and that's the main thing. They handle so well. That's why they make these tracks so rough and with these triple jumps and all that. There's no way we could have done that, because the landing would have been probably fatal back in the day, and there's no way we could have done flips and stuff with those bikes the way they're doing now. And now they get to practice, you know, and jump into these foam pits and stuff like that. Whereas us, if we tried something like that, probably live or die, maybe.
Rock pits weren't quite as comfortable to land in?
Probably not. I didn't try it, though. Nobody did, unless it was an accident.
Okay. And then up here you've got, of course, Evel Knievel doing a wheelie. You got a picture of Evel Knievel. Mm-hmm. And what motorcycle museum wouldn't be complete without Evel Knievel somehow or another?
You got to have that, because, well, first of all, I'm a big fan, and you'll see here in the museum that we've got a couple of that same model of motorcycle that he used to jump on.
Oh, really?
Here, so I can explain a little bit to you. But yeah, Evel Knievel was, I would think worldwide, if he's probably the most identifiable motorcyclist ever, no matter where you go. Like, I travel internationally with our business quite a bit, and no matter where I go, I'll ask somebody, can you mention a name of an American motorcyclist that you can think of? Everybody, even in China, goes, Evel Knievel. So it's amazing.
And there again, he was riding some old school stuff, but he was doing pretty amazing things at the time with what he had.
That's why he crashed so much. So was jumping that Harley XR 750. It's heavy and had about 4 inches of travel. So
the landings had to be rough.
He was a brave soul, that guy, but he's amazing.
Okay, now as we're coming here into the actual museum part, we start off with a Simplex automatic motorcycle. Tell me a little bit about that. It's old.
Yeah, I believe, it's a 1957 Simplex, made in New Orleans, of all places.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were one of the few American motorcycle manufacturers back in the day. Most of them had already gone out of business. Like by the time they made this, Indian was already out of business. Is mainly probably just Simplex and Harley Davidson.
Really?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, Simplex isn't around anymore.
No, they threw the towel in the early 60s, but they were in business for about 30 years, which is a long run for a motorcycle manufacturer.
So now we come into the big part of the museum, or the showroom, I guess is what you'd say. It looks to me like you've got, what, 100 motorcycles in here?
In the whole place, I think we have about 120.
About 120.
Yeah.
And you were saying earlier when I came in that you cover mostly the 50s, 60s, and 70s?
Well, not. It's mainly 60s and 70s, but then we have a few older, a few newer here, like that right behind you.
Yeah, this one's definitely older. It's a 1910 Harley Davidson.
But if you look at the sign there, it's a reproduction.
Oh, okay.
It's an amazing reproduction, running to scale replica of a 1910 Harley Davidson.
And when was this reproduction made?
I've owned it for probably about 10 years.
Okay.
Here, and they're made actually in Georgetown, Texas, which is only about 45 minutes from here.
Oh, really? And they're still making them?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mostly for museums and collectors, because they're nothing you would ride on the street.
Right.
So, but the real ones are just not affordable. You know, something like this brand, an original 1910 would probably worth $60,000-$70,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then you've got an Indian over here. Tell us a little bit about the Indians.
Well, every motorcycle museum has to have an Indian in here. This is a 47 Indian Chief, Roadmaster. It's restored, but it was restored about 25 years ago. And it's absolutely beautiful. I love the maroon color. It's very iconic bike for Indian enthusiasts. All like to see that bike, and it's just really beautiful. And
it is beautiful.
Yeah, and everybody likes the exhibit with the big statue of Chief Motorhead.
Chief Motorhead.
That's what we named him.
Indian here. Yes. And now the Indian motorcycle, you said they went out of business before 1957?
I believe 54.
54.
54 is when they went out of business. And then later on that decade, I think another company, maybe out of UK or somewhere, acquired the name.
Okay.
And then they started putting the Indian name on a lot of different bikes, but it didn't really fool the American public.
Okay.
They didn't really accept a foreign-made bike with the Indian name on it.
Well, some of those bikes have started coming back, like Norton. Didn't they go out of business and then reintroduce here 10, 12 years ago or something?
Excuse me, yes. They went out of business in the 70s, along with the other British manufacturers. I think Triumph went out of business in the early 80s.
And they're making Triumphs again, though, right?
Oh, yeah. And such great bikes, too. The Triumphs, they compete toe-to-toe with, with all the Japanese companies. They're amazing what they've done with that. But the Norton, they brought back that name, and it's more of a special order kind of thing. But yeah, it's nice to see those names come back, and we've been reading that the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world is in India.
Oh, really?
Yes, and they make some of the Harley bikes, from what I understand, the smaller ones, and they make them for different manufacturers. But they also bought the BSA name, and supposedly they're going to be coming out with replicas of the original 60s and early 70s BSAs, like they have the Royal Enfield.
Okay.
See, the Royal Enfields have been made in India for a couple decades now.
Okay. I've got a friend that collects the BSAs, and he's got several of them. and they're super sharp looking bikes.
They're my favorite British bike, actually, a BSA. They're all pretty, but the BSAs, I just always like them better.
Okay, then we come on in and we're looking at a display of your flat track racing bikes. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we've got 7 or 8. You've got BSAs, Hondas, Harley Davidson. And explain the flat race just for people that don't really know what it is.
Well, it's generally just racing on a dirt oval, a clay track, or some other type of gravel surface where it's just mainly turning to the left, kind of like the NASCAR oval tracks.
And they kind of do a drift on all of their corners, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I've watched different videos of it, and it's a lot of fun to watch just because they're kind of in a drift for most of their ride.
And sometimes at 120 miles an hour.
That's insane.
It's insane. Yeah, those guys, and 3 side by side with 3 bikes too. It's without a doubt the most dangerous form of motorcycle racing is flat track.
Wow.
But to me it's also the most exciting to watch.
Oh yeah.
Too. They really go fast, and those guys are amazing. So we have some bikes here. Probably the most iconic flat track bike ever is the Harley Davidson XR 750.
Now, was that the one that you were saying that you said the 750 is what Evel Knievel rode?
He did.
It's the same bike, all except set up different?
Same bike, probably set up about the same as this one right here. It doesn't, the one in the pictures of him looked no different than this bike right here, except it had the American flag paint job.
Wow.
So I think the factory provided him with a bike just like this, and they put their own paint job on there, I believe.
Huh.
Yeah. So you can see it's not some lightweight dirt bike he was jumping.
No.
You know, that thing probably weighs about 300 pounds or more. Probably more.
And it's amazing the distances that he was riding over, you know. I mean, what was it, 21 Greyhound buses or?
Yeah, I don't know what the math is. I think he was jumping maybe around 200 feet back then, a little more. Now, there's a young guy from Australia, Robbie Madison, that I think he jumps about almost 400 feet.
Wow. And Evel Knievel's son's jumping too.
Well, he's already retired.
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
Dang, where's time gone?
I would think,
I guess I was like 10 years old when I was watching Evel Knievel on TV doing some of his stunts.
A lot of times passed. I think his son's in his 50s now, so
wow.
I don't think he's doing that anymore. And then we got a couple other really interesting flat track bikes. Young guy from Lubbock, Texas, Bubba Schobert, was the Grand National Champion of off-road, not motocross, it was flat track and TT. You had to have multiple skills back then. You had to road race, TT, and flat track.
And what is TT?
It has partial flat track, but then it has a couple turns in it and some jumps.
Okay.
So it's just a combination of, it's probably what we had back in the 50s and 60s before they called it motocross. They called it scrambles back then.
Okay.
So it's more like that. But we are really fortunate to have his restored bike that he won the TT races for 3 years on. And that's a one-off bike right there. It's been loaned to us by a guy out in Midland, Texas, that's got an incredible collection of racing bikes with history.
Wow.
You even have some of his trophies there.
And he was riding, it says, between 85 and 87, and it's a 600cc bike.
Yeah, that's for TT, because it was lighter, but on the flat track, he rode a 750 Honda twin called the RS 750, and that bike, Honda totally dominated. It was always won by Harley Davidson for decades. Honda, as soon as they got in it, they had some of the better riders, and they won every year until word had it that Harley Davidson was at a disadvantage because they were running this pushrod motor. So what they did was they put some restrictions in there to give the Hondas a little bit of a disadvantage. and at that time, Mr. Honda goes, that's it for us. We proved our point.
Right.
But Bubba Schobert, he was absolutely amazing, and then his career ended sadly at Laguna Seca, I believe, the road race out there in California.
Okay.
And had an accident there, and it ended his racing career. But you know, he's still doing good and still around and still in Lubbock, Texas.
Well, cool. Okay, and we got a 72 BSA 750. And what's the Goodyear bike?
That is a Yamaha 750. It was raced by a guy named Frank Gillespie out of California. Very successful racer. His specialty was the mile race, which was the real fast one. And this was his actual bike that was restored years ago. And so that's got a lot of race history. Back then, the dominant bikes were the Harley XRs and the British bikes, the Triumph and the BSAs. And then Yamaha got in it. And guess who started winning so much after that? It became Harley Davidson and Yamaha after a while.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, the Japanese definitely made their mark early on in racing.
Okay, then we turn around and we see some, we see a drag bike, a Harley Davidson drag bike. How fast was that thing going?
I believe it did in the 9s, but it's a factory bike. And Harley made them. It's called the Destroyer. They made them, let me see, this is a 2006. This one's brand new. It's never been started.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful bike.
It's a very beautiful bike. It was very radical. It was really unusual for Harley Davidson to make a out-of-the-box race bike.
Okay.
But I don't think they have made, this is probably the last out-of-the-box race bike Harley will ever make right here. So it's amazing. They sound amazing. I've heard them.
I'll bet. And then you've got another one here that's a hand-built custom chopper with a custom paint job. It's a beautiful bike.
Isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, that was built back in the mid-2000s, when the big, in the 90s and the early 2000s, you know, they had the big chopper craze. You probably remember all the TV shows.
Oh, yeah.
American Chopper, Jesse James. Everybody and their brother had a build a chopper show. And this was one of those bikes that was built back in the day. My brother actually built it. And
your brother built it
and loaned it to the museum. Yeah, his company used to be the largest manufacturer of custom forks.
Oh, really?
For the custom bikes. Yeah, so.
Well, and that's all a kickback to the 60s when all the hippies were riding choppers. Well, probably not hippies.
Hell's
Angels. Some of the more radicals. The hippies were driving the vans.
Yeah, or thumbing.
I got kind of a dirty look when I said the hippies were riding the bikes. He kind of looked at me with a little bit of a sour look.
I was gonna say.
So we got to backtrack on that one real quick. I'm showing my true.
No, I'm sure there were plenty of hippies riding choppers back then. But I'll tell you a little bit about this paint job on this chopper. It's 19 layers, and 19 layers of graphics in there. So they
really
put a layer, and then they finish it, and then they paint another layer. So all these graphics you see on here are stacked on top of each other here. And then what they did And we always, when the kids come in here, we tell them to look for all the skulls in here. And when the lights shine on it, there's about 300 little skulls
really
embedded in the paint job at different levels. And
oh yeah,
it's an incredible paint job. I can't imagine how much it cost, but it took months to paint this bike.
wow, that's unbelievable that you'd have that many layers.
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
I see one.
Do you?
Right there.
Okay. Well, they're all over the place. You can.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, you can see them a lot back in the fender because it's
They're
flat.
really ghosty.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta really look for them.
Yeah, there's one right there.
Oh yeah.
See? Yeah. So, yeah, they're all over the place on this bike. On the fenders, the side covers. The guy that painted it was absolutely amazing.
This is something that people need to see because this is just way cool.
Yeah. It's hard to describe, really.
Well, yeah, I don't know how you would describe it. It's just it's a basic kind of a maroony type red, but it's got all kinds of graphics through here with black and white plaids and gears on yellow ribbons and just phenomenal bike.
Yeah, very creative.
And then you've got a couple of the old school choppers back here.
Yeah.
The Triumph and a Honda 750, 1970 Honda and a 1967 Triumph.
Yes, those are very cool. Back in the day, people turned just about any kind of bike they could into a chopper. Choppers were big back in the late 60s, early 70s. And what was really popular was the Honda 750s. There were several manufacturers of frames for those.
Oh, really?
One of the most popular was the company that made this one, a company called Denver's Choppers out of California. Denver made a lot of different choppers. He made Harleys, Triumphs, but he's probably most known for the Honda 750s.
Wow.
There, so that's a very cool bike.
It is.
And then the Triumph here is a 650 Bonneville motor, hardtail. That is just so typical old school, late 60s right there. And you can see the seat. You probably remember what they called that seat back in the day.
You're going to have to tell me.
It's a bitch seat.
A bitch seat. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, anyway, you can see that would have been a little bit scary because there's no foot pegs on there for the passenger. I don't know how the heck they hung on. But it's got a beautiful pearlescent paint job. You take it outside and it changes colors, pink, purple, different colors. And then whoever had it did an amazing job in hand engraving the side covers on there. Whoever did it was very talented.
Yes.
Spent a lot of time on there.
They're both beautiful bikes.
It's yeah, and I like them because they're unusual. I love Harley choppers too, but you got to appreciate the old school originals.
And then around this museum, just to let everybody know, that he's got all kinds of posters and pictures of flat track racers. He's got guys riding old motorcycles. Here's a guy that looks like he's going to have a wipeout pretty bad. Just lots of different bikes, lots of different pictures of scenes and stuff that would have been taking place during the races and road trips and some of that. Picture of Jimi Hendrix sitting on a bike. I don't know who the other two are. Indian Larry.
Indian Larry, yeah, he's real famous in the custom motorcycle industry. He passed several years back, but matter of fact, his last two bikes, I think, just sold. His estate sold them at the Mecum auction in Vegas this last January, and I think they went together probably in the neighborhood of about $400,000.
Holy smokes!
Yeah, at best I can remember. I may be off a little bit. The other guy's just a really cool picture of probably a Hell's Angel from back in the day on a panhead
Okay.
Harley panhead chopper. So I just thought that picture was cool and put it up.
And then you've got a Honda drag bike, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's probably one of the rarest bikes in the museum. It's a double engine Honda
It is.
dragster. Yeah, built by RC Engineering, who was Russ Collins. And he was most famous for building a triple engine dragster back in the day that was streamlined. And he was actually about the fastest man in the world on drag racing back in the day.
Now, when he's talking about double engine on this, we're looking at a bike that's blue, has Honda written across the top part of the frame, but he's got two engines. They're two four-cylinder engines. One sits a little bit higher than the other. How do they connect those to where they run together, right? With belts or chains or?
Yeah, they have a chain between them, from what I understand. I'm not. This is on loan to us. Well, you can see it. Actually, sorry, I lied. It's a belt.
It is
There's
a belt.
There's a picture of the belt between them. Yeah.
Seems like that'd be a real challenge to get the two of those engines timed together to where they were running perfect to complement each other.
Yeah, it had to be an incredible feat, but they were the best. They were the best in the world at the time, and I don't know, have you heard of the company Vance and Hines?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, they're the ones who have been building all the Harley race bikes for years, and they're the largest probably manufacturer of custom exhaust and performance parts for Harleys, Indians. So they're, I'm sure a lot of your listeners that knows a lot about the bikes will know the names Terry Vance and Byron Hines. They were actually Russ Collins' parts manager and chief engineer back in the day for RC Engineering, and then they went off on their own and started Vance and Hines probably 30 years ago, and extremely successful company. It's a really big company, and they do all the performance R&D for Harley Davidson.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of history there.
Yeah, I used to ride bikes a lot when I was in high school, in my early 20s and some of that, and I've been out of it other than looking, I mean, when Sturgis comes through Wyoming, you get to see lots of pretty bikes and that kind of stuff, but there again, most of those are Harley, so I really don't have a lot of knowledge on a lot of these bikes just because I haven't kept up with the industry and that, but I love looking at them. Mm-hmm. You've got a display here, looks like mostly Triumphs. You've got a Moto Guzzi and a Indian and a BSA.
And a Norton.
And a Norton, okay.
A couple Nortons. A Cheney.
Okay, now I've never heard of a Cheney.
Yeah, that was a famous chassis builder in the UK, and Eric Cheney, and he built chassis for so many different types of motors. He built them for road racing, off-road, motocross, flat track, you name it. And probably one of the most famous chassis builders back in the day. And this one was built by them. They're very rare. It's got a BSA 500 motor in it, but it's punched out to like 680. It's had probably a lot of motor work done to it. It's really a beautiful bike. It's really hard to describe.
Wow. And most of these are road bikes, right?
Most of them are, yeah, except for two.
Now this is a really interesting looking Norton that you've got right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of metal work down around the back wheel and some of that. It's a 1962 Norton 250 Jubilee Deluxe. That's just an interesting looking bike.
Yeah, it is. It's very unique. They didn't ship that many to the U.S. Because, the Japanese are already starting to make cheaper, probably better and more reliable bikes already in the early 60s. So, but they made them enclosed like this, the enclosed front fender and back fender. A lot of people kind of jokingly call them the bathtub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They almost kind of look like the modern day scooters that you see running around, but
Yeah,
not really.
They built it like that for Great Britain because of how much rain and everything they get. It kept the rider dry by being enclosed like that, but it didn't go over very well in the U.S. because that's just a 250 and they're actually kind of heavy and twin cylinder, and they didn't put out that much power, so they just didn't sell that many of them. They also made a 650 version of them that was a lot more popular.
Okay.
But now, you know how things go. Things that weren't cool back in the day are now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it always seems to go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, while we're coming back down the ramp, we're going to take a quick break for a sponsor, and then we'll be right back. Now, as we come on around here, I notice that you've got a whole bunch of street bikes again that are more the Japanese made, which is what I rode when I was in high school. You've got some Suzukis and Yamahas, Hondas, and kind of a whole line of them here. Anything in particular about these other than they're all really nice shape? Do you restore all these yourself?
Almost every one of these is original.
They're original.
Original. Some of them even have the original tires on them.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I prefer that. And not only that, but I just don't have time to do full restorations anymore. So I really seek out these are what I call survivors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I would say none of these are restored. None of these bikes.
Wow.
And they all are Japanese, but there's one very unique one here. Back in maybe the 50s and 60s, all your big department stores, Sears, Montgomery Ward's, Penny's, they all sold motorcycles.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is a bike here. It's a Sears Allstate 250. It's called the Twingle, 1961. And at least that's what people nicknamed them. It was actually made by Puch in Austria.
Okay.
All those motorcycles that were sold by the department stores were all imported from Italy and Germany. So, and some from France as well. But this one here is original Survivor. And what it was they called it a Twingle because it was a single rod with two pistons on it.
What?
Yeah, it doesn't have, it's not a twin, it's a twin cylinder, but there's not two rods on the crank. There's only one rod, but the rod comes up and it goes into a T and two pistons are on it.
Really?
So it's a twin single.
I have never heard of that type of an engine setup. Mm-hmm. Now, so both the pistons came up at the same time?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and they run amazingly well, and they're very cool. They don't vibrate like what you would think with two pistons coming up, because it's got the same motion as a single cylinder. And then you can see here the carburetors coming in from the side.
Okay. In
their what they call crankcase inductions, two-stroke motor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So very, very unique. And I said that Sears sold it. We have a 1960-61 Sears catalog here, and there's the bike for $499.
$499.
Yeah.
That's just amazing. It's amazing when you look at the old Sears catalogs, what all you could buy. I mean, they had everything. You could buy a house from Sears.
Sure.
You know, back in the day.
New mail order guns.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you want.
Everything.
Yeah. Back then, that was your go-to thing, and you get that new Sears catalog, everybody got excited.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember when I was a kid, we used to get excited, but they weren't selling motorcycles.
Yeah. Yeah, they quit doing that.
Actually, I was born in 61, so I guess they were selling motorcycles, but I don't know if they were in 68.
They were.
Were they?
They did until the early 70s.
Well, then I guess I probably did see them. It just didn't register with me.
Yeah, we used to love to go there and look at the motorcycles, but they weren't anything we would have bought back in the day because we were off-road guys.
Right. And this one here, is this the Baby Dream? I had a neighbor that had a Honda Dream.
Yeah, that one's called, it's a 65 CA95, called a 150 Bentley. And the Dream was a 305.
Okay.
Same body, it looked like it, just a big version of this. And so they called this the Baby Dream. And the Dream had the balanced, really cool fenders and the enclosed fork and the balanced rear fender. Very chrome panels on the tank. So it was very... Honda did a really good job of making that look into a classy bike.
Right. Yeah. No, it was a classy bike.
And it was amazing as twin cylinder electric start, even back in 1965.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And then we look over here on the other side, and most of these are all dirt bikes.
Mm-hmm. Those are some motocross bikes, just various ones. It started out being European only. Bikes, but ended up putting some other brands, Can-Am, made in Canada, then little Yamaha 125, and then a Carabella made in Mexico. That's probably the
really?
That's probably the prettiest bike in the whole little display here.
And they all had such interesting names, like Boltaco, and Sax, and Husqvarna. And how do you pronounce this one? Pooch?
Yeah, well, that's the way I pronounce it. I think people say Pook.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're the ones that made that motor in the Sears Allstate.
Right, yeah. I heard
same.
you mention that name. I just couldn't remember where we had mentioned it, but yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of European manufacturers of dirt bikes. They were the ones who really started it, but then the Japanese took over by the early 70s. Then we got a few little enduro bikes over here. Hodaka is probably the most iconic dirt bike from back in the 60s and early 70s. They pretty much started the Japanese trail bike craze.
Okay.
Back in the day.
Wow. And they're all so beautiful. I mean, they're all just really nicely displayed. This museum is just nicely displayed. And beautiful bikes.
Thank you. Yeah, we try to not cram them too tight together where you can still see them. And every bike has got a description, a little bit of story about the bike, and generally about the manufacturer too. We designed this museum to be educational. We just didn't want, like a lot of motorcycle museums you see around the country have this barn effect.
Yeah.
Where there's just spikes scattered everywhere, and they may put a little thing, a 1960 something on there, but that's about it. But it just doesn't tell you anything about the bike or the company that made it. And we wanted it to be a full experience when people come in here. So if they don't know anything about motorcycles, then they're going to leave knowing a lot more.
But if you're like me and you owned one or two of these, or were familiar with them at a point in time, you can get up close and look too. And the way you've got them displayed, you can see everything that there is to see. They're not behind a barrier or anything else. Of course, you don't want to walk up on the stages where they're presented, but you can stand here and see just about every detail from any point on any of these bikes.
Yeah, that's the way we wanted it. Of course, we were limited with space anyway, so but we did build these little platforms, not only to get them up a little bit higher where you could see them, but also as a barrier too. And it does. You're right. You're totally right. It gets you close enough where you can really see the details, but it makes you not want to touch them, which is what we prefer.
You don't want them touched, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got a little display here devoted to Steve McQueen, the king of cool, and he was a major motorcycle advocate with his riding. In fact, he was featured on Any Sunday, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was one of the financiers of the movie too.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was that passionate about it.
Yeah, and he wrote a lot. And you've got this one. Is this the motorcycle from? Oh, I'm trying to think of what the name of the movie was.
The Great Escape.
The Great Escape. There we go. Yeah.
Very, very famous, iconic motorcycle. it's not a motorcycle movie. It's just got some really famous scenes in there.
Well, yeah, when he's trying to get away from his prisoner of war camp, if I remember right. It was a long time ago that I saw the movie, but he escapes on motorcycle just like this, or is this the one from the movie?
No, I wish it was the one.
Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah. It would have sold it already and retired, but no, this one here is a exact replica of the original bike that he rode in The Great Escape.
Okay.
The one that they jumped over the barbed wire fence
Right.
and everything, and he was running from the Germans. Neat little story about that is this bike is TT 650 from back in the day, and it's a 1961 model. Well, when was World War II?
1944.
Correct. So, but the story behind it is that it would have been logical if they stole that motorcycle from the Germans, it would have been a BMW.
Okay.
Okay, because that's what the German army used back in the day. But McQueen and his stunt rider, Bud Eakins, there's no way they're going to jump one of those old hardtail BMWs. Mm-hmm. So he says, well, the only way we're going to do this scene is with the bike with suspension. And from what I understand, he says, we can use one of mine. So they painted it all up, olive drab, made it look period correct. And this is the model and a bike that looked exactly like this that appeared in the movie.
Okay.
And then supposedly because of insurance with the producers, they wouldn't let Steve make that jump.
Oh.
So we had a stunt double of Bud Eakins, who is a famous stunt rider, and his best friend back in the day did that famous jump in there. But this one here is restored almost exactly, even with the same little license plate on the top of the
Right.
front fender. You can there you can see it.
Okay.
The one
yeah,
in the movie.
Yeah.
On
Okay.
that picture.
He's got a picture on the wall of a shot that was probably taken on set.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see the bikes are identical. And
Yeah.
so the person that did this did just an amazing job and did a lot of research. Same model.
Cool. And then you've got some other pictures of Steve McQueen set up for racing on the front of Sports Illustrated. A couple of posters from The Great Escape. And just a nice little display here.
Correct.
That is cool. Then we come down the back wall. What is the Smokin' Woody Woodpecker? He's got a bike here that says Jawa on the side, JWA. It's a single cylinder, sits really close to the ground. It must be a flat tracker.
It's a form of flat tracker. It's called Speedway, and it generally is raced on a little bit shorter track than flat track. These bikes have Jawa used to be the dominant engine. They were built in the Czech Republic.
Okay.
In the Eastern Bloc back in the day, and 500 cc's, alcohol burning, all no gears, all one gear,
Wow.
one speed, and they race them side by side. Some of the craziest, most bravest riders ever race these speedway bikes, all the way from back in probably the 1920s is when it started, and they're still doing it to these days.
Wow.
And it's more popular in Europe, parts of Europe, and Russia, Poland, New Zealand. It's really big over there, and some of those places they would get 150,000 spectators. They'd fill Wembley Stadium. That was the World Championship every year, was at Wembley in England.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So you got to love the speedway bikes. I encourage anybody to Google that, motorcycle speedway racing, and watch a couple YouTube videos.
I'm going to have to do that. Yeah. I was just watching, you've got a TV set up here that's running video of lots of different races. They were just doing some ice racing, which is just That's beyond my scope of even being able to figure that out. You know, they've got those big old spikes on their tires, and racing around at high rates of speed on ice just seems dangerous as hell.
Yeah, now they put guards around the front wheels, kind of bumpers, so if the guy goes down and the bike hits him, it'll kind of bump him all the way instead of perforate him.
Oh, yeah.
And but it didn't used to be that way. But it's still, if one of those bikes goes over the top of you, you know, you'll be like a sprinkler probably.
Yeah.
Squirting like a sprinkler. But no, that's totally insane. But they do it a lot up north. This one was actually an ice bike.
Was it?
And the guy that I bought it from took the ice tires off and put these on.
Now, the ice tires would have been interesting to be able to see up close, but...
I've got a poster of one right here.
Okay.
Right there on that wall.
Oh, yeah, you do. Right down by where those bathrooms are at the end of the hall, which the bathrooms are quite cool, too. You've got all those little sayings in there and little posters and some pretty fun little things to look at.
Thanks.
And then over here on the other side, you've got a section that's devoted to women riders.
Yes. Famous women, and a lot of them. We only touched the surface as far as all the famous motorcycle women throughout the years. A lot of them are in the AMA, American Motorcycle Association Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we try to tell that story so people understand that there's a lot of motorcycle pioneers that were women.
Right.
And back in the days when that was taboo.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, especially this lady right here. She is the most amazing person on this wall as far as I'm concerned. It's Bessie Stringfield.
Okay.
They called her the Motorcycle Queen of Miami. And you can kind of read a little bit
So she was born in Kingston, Jamaica, migrating to Boston when she was still young. At the age of 16, Bessie taught herself to ride her first motorcycle, a 1928 Indian Scout. In 1930, at the age of 19, she commenced traveling across the United States. She made 7 more long-distance trips in the U.S., eventually riding through the 48 lower states, Europe, Brazil, and Haiti. During this time, she earned money from performing motorcycle stunts in carnival shows. Due to her skin color, Bessie was often denied accommodation while traveling, so she would sleep on her motorcycle at filling stations. Due to her sex, she was refused prizes in flat track races. During World War II, Bessie served as a civilian courier for the U.S. Army, carrying documents between domestic Army bases. She completed the rigorous training and rode her own blue 61 cubic inch Harley Davidson. During the 4 years she worked for the Army, she crossed the United States 8 times. And in the 1950s, Bessie moved to Miami, Florida and founded the Iron Horse Motorcycle Club. Her skill and antics at motorcycle shows gained the attention of local press, leading to the nickname the Motorcycle Queen of Miami. Bessie is credited with breaking down barriers for both women and Jamaican American motorcyclists. In the 2000 American Motorcycle Association created the Bessie Stringfield Memorial Award to recognize outstanding achievement by a female motorcyclist. Bessie was inducted into the Motorcycle Association Hall of Fame in 2002. Dang, she had a life.
Amazing.
Yeah, across the United States 8 times.
Yeah, and faced adversity wherever she went.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure a lot of the early motorcycle women, just like a lot of the early cattle women and stuff, you know, I mean, they were dressing different, they were behaving different and operating in a realm outside of theirs. I'm sure a lot of them faced a lot of adversity, but like it said, you know, doubly with her.
Yeah, they were infringing in a man's world back in the day.
Well, yeah.
What was perceived as being, but that's what most of these women here probably faced, just about every one of them, but it's just amazing. You can just read and read and read about what these women accomplished
And some of
Back
the other
in the
women
day.
that he has highlighted here is Pearl Hall, Margaret Wilson, Linda DeGow, and Dot Robinson, Mary McGee. So there were quite a few of them, and it's amazing that Bessie was able to work for the military and all of the things that she did.
Yeah, she was. She must have been an amazing person. It would have been nice to meet her. Mary McGee down here, she's still around. She's raced dirt bikes until just recent years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's very amazing, and she's was inducted into the AMA Hall of Fame in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's amazing, and she's still active in motorcycle, mostly off-road.
And
dirt bikes.
Was she racing against men? She must have been. I
think so.
Did they have women's racing associations or?
Well, not back then.
Yeah, so she would have had to have been racing against the men.
Now, lately, there are, in different types of racing in different parts of the country, they have women's motorcycle classes, or that you can enter in. We used to, they probably wouldn't like it these days, but back when I raced in the 70s and early 80s, we called it the powder puff class.
Well, and they still call it that when you go to demolition derbies and some of that.
Okay, well, that's what it was, and that's what it was called. So, maybe that's still what they call it. I don't know, but yeah, there's a lot of women racing motocross back in when I raced. They just raced in their own class.
Right.
So, but some of them probably could have beat us.
I was going to say, and that's the thing that's kind of funny is, you divide it out into classes, and I shouldn't even go down this road, but there's certain areas, physical activities and some of that, women maybe have a harder time competing with men. Let's say weightlifting and some of that, but in some of these other skills, like motorcycle riding, shooting, and some of those, it seems like women excel a lot of times, much to the dismay of men who think that it's a man's sport and we're the ones that should be doing it. You see that the women actually can outperform the men in a lot of ways just because of the finesse they have.
Yeah, and the concentration and yeah.
And probably being that it's a little bit more of a challenge because I'm on the bottom end here. I need to prove myself.
Yeah. I would say there's.
I don't know what all the reasons are, but you just see it a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you've got a little Honda Trail 90. Was that the most popular bike ever made?
One of that was the utility bike, first utility bike before they came up with three-wheelers and now quads.
Right.
That's what people would take on their campers, and they would take deer hunting. And they made these big racks that would go on the back, and you could literally throw a deer across there.
You still see them on the back of motorhomes and some of that occasionally. But
those are so perfect because they made the handlebars so they folded down, so you could put them on the back of your motorhome. And they have an extra little gas tank, a little about a half gallon on them. That's detachable, and you can just go to the gas station, fill it up, and attach it. There's just very, very well thought out. They had a dual range gearbox, high and low.
Right.
So if you were climbing steep hills or stuff, you click it in low, and it just went up like a little tractor.
It just seems like back in the day, you saw those things absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, they're still really popular right now. People love those. College kids like them.
Oh, I'm
getting
sure.
around campus.
Yeah.
They like that old cool stuff.
And then what's the story with the Super Rat?
That's Odaka. That's that probably the same as this little trail bike I showed you.
Oh, okay.
Over here, the Super Rat was a motocross bike, 100cc. It was very, very popular, and you saw those everywhere back in the day because they were real inexpensive. I think they probably sold for probably between $400 and $500.
Okay.
Really fast, and they were. I think that they were the very first true race motocross bike coming out of Japan.
Out of Japan.
But they were sold by a company, imported by a company in Oregon, in a little tiny town, I think called Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was owned by a company called Pavatco, and that's what's on the logos on the tanks.
Okay.
And they lasted for quite a while. They were an import of a lot of different products. So if any guy that comes in that rode or raced a dirt bike, 60s, 70s, if you ask them what's the most iconic dirt bike in here, it's that one right there.
That one right there.
Everybody recognized the chrome tank.
Okay.
On those things.
All their tanks and the thing that's weird is I grew up in Portland, Oregon, but I don't know that I've ever seen one of those.
They had to be, I guarantee you they were swarming up there.
They had to have been.
They had to, yeah.
I'm beginning to think maybe I lived in some sort of a little shell.
Yeah, it's all original too, tires and everything.
Wow.
Half these bikes up here on this stand are original survivors.
Okay.
They're not restored.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing a dirt bike doesn't have scratches and bangs and dings and all that kind of stuff, but they're all in extremely nice shape.
Yeah, even the tires.
Yeah.
Yeah, people just parked them, kept them under a shed, away from rust.
This gallery here is just absolutely gorgeous. I love looking at these old bikes. I mean, you know, they've all got their gas tanks and seats, and they're pretty basic, but they're just all so pretty and so well displayed. Now, do you have another gallery also?
Yeah, I've got something over here in the corner we missed.
Oh, well, let's not do that.
Yeah, these are road racers.
Oh, okay.
Right here, these, just a small display with 3 bikes, but these two right here, these 2 Yamahas are iconic. This one to the left is a TZ750. It's a 750cc 4-cylinder 2-stroke road racing bike.
4-cylinder 2-stroke.
Yes.
That thing had to scream.
Oh my gosh, yeah. They had a hard time designing a tire that would handle all that power. They shred tires.
Really?
Yeah, they won national and world champions. They won Daytona many years in a row. These are super rare bikes because they're only for racing.
Right.
And that's it.
And it looks like they've got massively large gas tanks on them, maybe 15 gallon, 10, 15 gallon.
I don't know.
They're big.
Probably under,
all 3 of these have
probably under 10, because they would take pit stops during those races and come in. And but these, we feel very fortunate to have that somebody loaned us that bike. It runs, sounds really great. And this other one here is another road racing bike. I believe it's called a TA 125. And it would have been made in the late 60s, and it was built by one of the most famous race builders back in the day. His name is Don Vesco. He's out of Salt Lake City.
Okay.
And this particular bike here was raced by a guy named Travis Lemberg, and he raced it at the Bonneville Salt Flats.
Okay.
And also this bike placed at the Daytona 100 race.
Really?
Yeah,
now
road race.
We've got a trophy sitting here. It says top time motorcycle, A/FMC, El Mirage Dry Lakes in California. And it says 209.302 miles an hour. So this thing went almost 210 miles an hour.
Not this bike.
Not this bike.
What this is a friend of mine bought a lot of this memorabilia from the Vesco family, because Don Vesco passed several years ago. In it, he got a bunch of Don's old trophies. Okay. This is Don Vesco's trophy where he set that record at the El Mirage Dry Lakes, which is basically the same like Bonneville, but in California.
And how fast was this one going?
From what I understand, this little 125 went around 125 miles an hour.
That's still pretty fast.
It's very fast, especially on...
I can't even imagine being on a bike at 209 miles an hour, but I accidentally ended up at Bonneville during Speed Week. And while I was there was a guy on a motorcycle that I think they said did something like 325 miles an hour. And I was just floored that somebody would actually sit on a motorcycle at 300 miles an hour.
It probably had the streamliner fairings on it, and it looked more like a rocket or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I wasn't able to see it. I know that the guy was sitting on it somehow or another.
Yeah.
But the distance from where the spectators are to where the actual race track is about 200 yards. So your sight distance is quite a ways out there. But I can't even imagine being on a bike at 200 miles an hour. The wind resistance and some of that, like you said, you had to have fairings.
Especially on an unstable surface like that salt.
Yeah.
It would have to, one little bump. And Don Vesco was most famous for his Bonneville bikes. I believe he built one that went almost 400 miles an hour back in the day with motorcycle engines in them. And
that's just unbelievable.
I'm not a huge Bonneville historian, so
Right.
I'm just talking in general terms, but he's probably the most famous name for motorcycles at the Bonneville, I would think, if you look back in history.
And a cool movie to watch, as long as we're talking about this, is The World's Fastest Indian. Have you seen that movie?
Many times.
I was going to say, I don't know how you couldn't have seen it.
I love that movie.
But The World's
so
Fastest
good.
Indian is just an awesome movie the whole way through.
It is, and it's, from what I understand, they followed the original story pretty well. I mean, having Anthony Hopkins as the actor really helped a lot too. He did an amazing job, but from what I understand, the story they told was pretty dang accurate.
Yeah, it's just when you're watching that and watching that guy build his own tires and build his own, all of his own parts and that kind
Pistons.
of stuff. The guy was amazing.
Yeah, that's a very iconic movie about Indian motorcycles. And what's amazing is I think I've heard that one of his records still stands.
I don't know.
Or it stood until just recent years.
Wow.
To go 200 miles an hour on a 1920 some motorcycle is pretty amazing.
Yes, it is. Now, I've seen several of these Penton bikes.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard of the Penton brand before either.
Oh, wow. They were probably the first really good dirt bike made, period. A lot of your old famous world champions, national champion, or mainly Americans rode Pentons back in the day because they were so much better and everybody was just two-stroke. They were essentially built by KTM over there in Austria. And anyway, they made them anywhere from 250 on down to 100 cc's. And John Penton up in Ohio went over to Austria looking for a company that could build these bikes for him, and made a deal with the owner of KTM at the time. The company was just right on the fringe of bankruptcy. And he showed them how to build these. Then they built the motors, and it ended up being one of the most popular bikes ever.
Wow.
So now they're really rare. This is what's called a 175 Jack Piner. The Jack Pine Enduro was one of the hugest, biggest, most famous off-road races back in probably through the 50s and 60s, 70s. And John Penton was a hugely successful racer back in the day. He won the Jack Pine Enduro several times. So they named the 175 model as the Jack Piner. And these right here are probably the most rare of the Pentons. Along with that '68 model. That's the very first year they
Yeah, you
made
had
them.
a couple more in there on the wall.
Yeah, '68 was the first year. So that one they called the Steel Tanker, and it's by far the most rare Penton. And there's a movie that I highly recommend called The John Penton Story.
Okay.
I think it's on Amazon or Netflix, and any motorcycle enthusiast should really watch that movie because there's so much history. It's not just about Penton and the Penton bikes, but right now KTM would not be in business as successful as they are if it wasn't for John Penton.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that.
It's a very cool.
I don't get a lot of movies watched, but I'll have to definitely tune into that one.
Yep.
Okay, now we come into this gallery. It looks like you kind of got a reading room set up with a couple of couches and some coffee table type books, and just a lot of pictures on the wall. You've got an old Schwinn Stingray bicycle in here. Those were popular in the day.
Everybody had them.
But this looks like you've mostly got mini bikes in here, or the smaller bikes that were super popular when I was a kid. My next door neighbor had a little Yamaha 80, and I think a couple of the other neighbors had them. And the Honda over here, that Honda's a classic little bike. I don't even know how to describe them, but they were a little, what, 60 or 80? 90?
50. They're called Z50s.
Okay.
Well, are you talking about the little red one?
No, I'm talking about the blue one and then the yellow one over here.
Yeah, the blue one's a 70, and then the yellow one's a 90.
Yeah.
And that one's a 50. That's probably the most iconic Honda right there is the little Z50 hardtail.
Okay.
That's a 71 right there. That's, to me, those are the coolest Hondas ever. And then there are a few Cushmans back there, like what
I was going to say, we started
early.
off talking about the Cushman and kind of coming back full circle. You've got, what, four of them here. You got the Cushman, an Allstate sold by Sears, made by Cushman. Mm-hmm. And then a Cushman 60 Super Eagle. And then this here's another of the, this one here's made by Pooch Daimler and sold by Sears.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, these all had American-made, what they call Husky motors.
Okay.
In these bikes, and they were all made in the U.S. And that bike was totally made in Austria, right there, by Pooch Daimler.
Wow.
Yeah.
And sold by Sears.
Yeah, they just private labeled them.
This one's got the little cowling for your legs, and
it's a very cool little bike.
it is. It's a really neat little
and it's
scooter.
got a clutch and a shifter too. You know, all these others are automatics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so these could get going pretty good.
Yeah, this is just really cool. I really like this display. And then you got your, what do we want to call that? Zombie rider or ghost rider? Or
His name's Charlie.
his name's Charlie.
Yeah, he's our mascot. Well, actually, this is our mascot right here. His name's Livingston. He's a mule deer that we bought up in Livingston, Montana.
Oh, okay.
On a bike ride one time. He's our mascot.
That must have been fun bringing him home on a bike.
Oh, no. We had the trailer with us too. We had the trailer. But no, this is a 1958 Sportster, and good friend of ours found it in a barn up in New Mexico by Roswell.
Okay.
And gave it to us because he had it in his Harley dealer displayed with the skeleton on it.
Okay.
And so we just adopted him and the bike. It's really cool.
It hasn't been restored. It's probably just exactly the way it was found in the garage.
It's exactly the way it was.
And it's cool looking.
Nothing's been changed on it. They even had a Area 51 sticker on it. Yeah.
Yep, they do.
And then you can see this is a Sportster, not a light bike.
Okay.
But back then there were no dirt bikes. You turned whatever you had into a dirt bike if you wanted to ride off-road, and you can tell they put the knobby on the back, knobbies front and back, and took the mufflers off, put a little small headlight on the front, and went riding. So I would say that this bike probably spent the majority of its life in the desert,
Yeah.
riding in the desert.
Oh, it's just a cool display.
Yeah.
Just a really cool
We
display.
love it. Yeah.
Well, Pat, I really appreciate you taking your time today, showing us through your museum and everything that you have to offer here. Do you guys have a website?
We do. It's hcmotorheads.com
hcmotorheads.com.
or hillcountrymotorheads.com. Either one works.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have a gallery that shows pictures of your museum here, or?
Yes, it's a pretty comprehensive website. There's a lot of information on there, and then we have a good presence on Facebook and also on Instagram.
Okay, so
too.
people can find you all over the place.
Sure, yeah, we're big into social media. It's our primary source for getting the word out.
Good.
About the museum, and we post regularly. You know, every few days we're posting something new
Good.
on there, keeping it fresh, and whenever we get a new bike to put in the museum, we always introduce it to everybody, and so it gives people encouragement to come see.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is awesome, and it's such a nice museum, displayed so nicely. I just so appreciate you taking your time. And I just turned around and I saw another little area here. So now I'm sneaking back.
That's the workshop.
That's the workshop. Holy smokes! Okay, can I enter?
Sure.
Okay.
This is a VIP tour.
I was ready to close this thing down, but I just got sidetracked. Wow, you've got another 60 bikes in here.
Yeah.
All in different stages of repair. Mm-hmm. Wow, and all of these will be on display at some point in time.
Well, we rotate bikes in and out. We're kind of maxed on how much we can put in there. Right now, we're trying to figure out how we can expand and add square footage to the museum. But for right now, we're kind of stuck with, I think we have about maybe 6,500 square feet, but we really need a lot more.
Wow.
For the bikes that we have.
Yeah,
but,
you do, because now I'm seeing a whole lot more.
yeah, there's a lot more, and there's a lot more than this.
And do you do most of your own restoration work, or do you farm it out?
Well, that's what it's come out to lately. Like I've never painted. I'm not a painter.
Okay.
And I'm not a big motor guy. You know, I can do general stuff, tune-ups, whatever. But if it's any kind of major motor work, I send it out. I do the cosmetic part. I strip them down, I detail them, polish, re-spoke the wheels, change the tires out, put them back together.
And how many years have you been doing this? Your whole life? I mean, it looks like you started young, but was that mostly riding, or was a lot of that mechanicking too?
Well, no. Well, you know, when you race motorcycles,
You're a mechanic.
you learn your mechanical skills
Right.
by necessity.
Yes.
But I started collecting in the mid 90s.
Wow.
So going on 25 years ago is when I bought my first couple old dirt bikes. Mainly what I used to race. I just wanted to restore it and kind of relive my past, my youth.
Right.
And it just turned into an obsession. And
It looks like an obsession.
well, my wife calls it a sickness, but it's a good one. You know, it keeps me off the streets. So
Yes. Well, and your wife seemed like she's enjoying this also. When we came in, she greeted us, super friendly, and just seems like a real sweet lady.
yeah, she's actually the face of the museum.
Okay.
Not me, because she's here every day.
Right.
She's the one that does all the social media. She's the administrator of the museum because I actually commute to the Dallas-Fort Worth area during the week, Tuesdays to Thursdays, because we have a business
Okay.
there. So this is a hobby. This is not a money-making thing.
Right.
This is a passion.
And your entrance fees to your museum aren't terrible bad either. What does it cost to get in here?
Well, $7 general admission, $5 if you're a vet or a active duty or a first responder, a teacher. over 65, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're not making tons of money off of admissions, but
No, we say that the admissions pays the utilities, basically, and that's about it. Everything else, we have to buy and sell bikes, which I do.
okay,
Yeah, like several of these bikes are being prepared to sell
okay,
in here. All three of both these up on the rack, this beautiful Kawasaki Triple is getting ready to be advertised. So is this Honda little 360 right here. And quite a few of these bikes. I would say probably 20 of these bikes will be resold
okay,
here. And that's how we pay the bills
okay.
here.
So if there's anybody out there that wants to be a donor, you're more than happy to take donations and help out that way, or
Sure, yeah. I mean,
or have a bike sitting in a garage that maybe needs to go someplace and they don't want it trashed or whatever.
that happens often. And one thing else too is we've got a lot of people who contact us and say, I got my dad's bike here, my uncle's, husband's, and don't know what to do with it, but I really don't want to get rid of it. Can you display it in a museum? And if it's something unique and something people like to see, then we'd gladly take it in. And then other people just want to sell their stuff. And so it gives us access to quite a few really cool bikes just because we're a museum.
Right.
So that's kind of a silver lining as well
Okay.
here. So there's really no end to it. All the bikes that are out there,
Oh yeah.
you know, everybody says barn find, barn find. Those are hard to find. The ones that you go in and you find it in the barn and you get it for $50, that don't happen anymore.
No.
Everybody knows what they're worth.
And it looks to me like you do a good job of finding ones that are in awesome shape to begin with.
Yeah, I can't really afford to. I don't take on major restorations. I don't have the. I could get bottlenecked for a couple months doing one, where if it's bikes that just need minor cosmetics and cleaning up and whatever, new paint maybe, you knock those out pretty fast and get them in the museum.
Right.
Yeah, so I prefer ones that are totally intact, you know, like this little Suzuki 250 Enduro right here. That thing's so beautiful and original. That thing's going to clean up really nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now that I've seen this part, I'm going to go ahead and close this down. I so appreciate your time again and taking it with us. And the way I finish out is I say the world is full of wonder. People need to get out. They need to explore, see what's out here. There's so much to see, so much to do. And everybody have an absolutely wonder-filled day.
Absolutely.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?